Hello there and welcome back into the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. I'm your host, Sam Hind, and today I've got the absolute honor and privilege of introducing you to a very special guest. She's the author of How to Be Resilient. She's an international keynote speaker, traveling all over, sharing her story of resilience and how to practice the art of being resilient. The Queen of Resilience herself, as dubbed by international 7-time world champion Layne Beachley, I'm going to be introducing you today to Stacey Copas. Stacey, at the age of 12, suffered a devastating accident that left her a quadriplegic. In this episode, she shares that story, the highs and lows, ups and downs, and a very honest and truthful journey around where she was and the journey that she went through to get to where she is today. I love how honest Stacey is about all of this. And most importantly, I love how passionate Stacey is about being resilient and learning to become more resilient in order to be the best possible version of ourselves that we can be. We are so privileged to have her sharing on the podcast today. And what I will say is one thing I'm super proud of, but absolutely something I need to make very clear before you tune on into this episode is this. Stacey and I are both very passionate about this topic. We both share a raw and real story from both of us we come to this episode with. But what I will say about this is we are by no means health professionals. And if you need to seek help, please ensure that you do so. Today, we talk a lot about the relationship we have with ourselves and the responsibility that we have around our own mental health. But it is up to you as an individual to seek out that help that you need. So please enjoy this episode, but understand that we come at this as literally a conversation between two friends, passionately chatting about something they really truly believe in and sharing some backstory to go with that. So, with no further ado, whether you are out for a walk right now listening to this episode, driving in your car, or sitting down on the couch with a cup of tea in hand, enjoy this episode. And don't forget, at the end, we're going to put as well into the show notes the details around Stacey's amazing book, How to Be Resilient. Make sure that you grab a copy for yourself. I know that you're going to be both inspired and awed by this beautiful woman. So, I'm going to hand over to her, introducing the amazing Stacey Copas. Hello, everybody, and welcome back in to the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. Look, I am so excited that I get to bring in such amazing guests to have a chat to, really because I love to learn from them as much as anything else, and today is no exception. I am so privileged and blessed to be welcoming on in Stacey Copas. So welcome on in, Stacey, and thank you so much for joining us today.
I'm really glad to be here, and I'm really excited for our chat.
Well, we're gonna have a really great chat. I know we've got some great stuff lined up. We've already been chatting for about half an hour about all sorts of things, which I know our audience have just missed out on. So we better make up for that. And Stacey, do you want to just start, because there's a ton that I want to get into with you today. But I know you've got an incredible story, and this is, you know, the core of what you do now, your book, etc. So for those that don't know you, would you mind telling everyone a little bit about who you are and why it is that you're here today?
Absolutely. So I'm the founder of the Academy of Resilience and author of How to Be Resilient, which is exactly what it says on the can, just lots of exercises and practical principles about building resilience. And I've come to be speaking about resilience, not from your typical, I think most people that speak about resilience talk about it from a perspective of being an academic or a psychologist. And I for years felt that I wasn't qualified to speak about resilience because I wasn't either of those things. So how I've come to speak about resilience is just through my own personal life journey. And I guess the key moment that really led me onto that journey was when I was 12 years old. I was cooling off in a backyard swimming pool with my younger brother, who was 10, and a couple of other boys around the same age. And it was a pool that I was very familiar with. It was a relative's place. And so I did what I did every time I visited there, and I just kept climbing up on the edge and diving in. And it was an above ground swimming pool, so it wasn't that deep, and it definitely wasn't one that was meant for diving. So I was getting yelled at to stop, but I'm sure you remember what it was like to be 12 and bulletproof and invincible. And so I just completely ignored that. But this one particular time, I'd been diving for a while, and then I was thinking I was splashing too much as I was diving in. So I stood on the edge there for a while, and I thought, what could I do to make a perfect dive? And what I decided to do was I thought if I was to keep my legs straight and hold my feet together, I thought in theory that would help me splash less as I dived in. So I ended up taking a deep breath and diving in and just did exactly that. And it felt like any other dive that I'd done before that until I went to try and swim up to the surface, and I realized I couldn't move. I didn't feel any pain. It didn't feel like anything had gone wrong, but I was stuck at the bottom of the swimming pool, completely conscious, holding my breath, panicking, desperately trying to get the attention of my brother, which I couldn't do. So I held my breath for as long as I could, and then when I couldn't hold it any longer, then I had to give in, and that panic that I was experiencing turned into a moment of pure terror as I just had to breathe in, and as I breathed in and my lungs filled with water, I blacked out. And it was a little bit after that then they realised that something had gone wrong, and they're a bunch of kids, so you can't expect them to have thought anything other than they thought I was mucking around at the time. And it was later that night at the third hospital that I was taken to that a doctor actually came and told me that I'd broken my neck and drowned and that I'd never walk again.
Gosh.
And prior to that, I was about to start high school. My dream had always been to be a vet, and I'd gotten into a selective agricultural high school. I was an athlete. I was the pitcher in the softball team in summer. I was one of the first 2 girls to ever play soccer for the school, and I represented every distance from the 100 metres right through to the cross country. So to be told that I'd never walk again felt like a death sentence to me at that time.
Yeah.
And so, the word resilience wasn't something that I was ever aware of back then. And it was going through the journey of many, many years afterwards of just being in a place of just being really bitter and angry and resentful about what had happened, but being very insular about that and just pretending I was getting on with life when really I hated life and I hated myself for a really long time there. And, it wasn't until later in my teens, I started to get out of a headspace of, trying to escape, which I was doing a lot through getting drunk and getting stoned. And so I started to sort of take the steps out of that. And then it wasn't until I'd sort of, gotten into uni and deferred and never went and got a job and pretty much was just doing what all my friends were doing. Yeah. Got a job, got my license, got a car, was dating someone I worked with, all of those things, that I began to really see that really, it wasn't the end of my life. It was just things were going to be a little bit different. And I then sort of stopped and began to realise that I couldn't change what had happened, but I could change the story I told about what happened.
Yeah.
And I could change what I did next. And that was sort of once I sort of did that, it was like the world had opened up and there was just possibilities everywhere instead of problems.
Yeah.
But yeah, resilience wasn't something that came into the piece even as a word until into my 30s, when I sort of began to realise there was something more impactful that I needed to do with my life. And it was mentor that put the label on it, and I was like, okay, that seems fitting. Trust the mentors, and here we are, sort of 11 years after that label was put to the work I do, and now, so I'm primarily doing things as a keynote speaker, as an author, and as a coach, helping people to really shift their perspective, particularly to see problems as possibilities and obstacles as opportunities. So I'm pretty blessed. I'm really blessed to have experienced the adversity I have, to then be able to have reverse engineered that all into a framework of how to turn things around when things don't go to plan.
Yeah. It's such a powerful story. And of course, we'll talk about your book a little later, but you tell that story a little more in depth. And of course, that journey in your book as well. So I highly recommend that everyone read that, check that out. But let's just talk for a little minute about resilience, because you said that it wasn't even a word in your vocabulary at that time. And I think that there's perhaps a lot of, misunderstanding around what resilience really is. And, for me in the past, resilience was always you put up a really big barrier and you get really strong and a tough exterior and you feel less. You just feel less of the emotion of what's going on. And you just continue taking what's coming at you. Is that what resilience really is?
Yeah, what I've discovered, particularly around resilience, is most of the stuff I do has been with people in business and building businesses. And what I've found is that most of the stuff that I've seen is it's sort of resilience has become synonymous with coping. And it is. It's just that, okay, just handle it, just handle it, just handle it, just keep going.
Get on with it.
Whereas I have a little bit of a different perspective on it. Like, I feel that, first of all, I see resilience is something that's proactive rather than just reactive, not just, okay, this isn't going to plan, I have to just keep going. I think that's probably more perseverance rather than resilience.
Yeah.
I see that resilience is something that we need to have before we need to use it. It's like digging the well before you're thirsty.
Yeah.
And so it's something that you build beforehand. But I see resilience not just how do you cope. I think that's obviously that's part of it. And often we hear people say, oh, it's about bouncing back, which I kind of screw my face up a little bit when people say the bouncing back, because it just implies that you just keep coming back to that point that you were before something didn't go to plan. Yep. Whereas I see resilience as an opportunity to grow and learn and to become stronger through being challenged. And so I like to look at it is that resilience is how we can actually grow through something rather than just go through it, and how we can thrive rather than just survive a situation. So I see that there's elements of, there's a baseline, okay, there's survival, but I really love to look at resilience as like, how do we grow? And I think it's a growth strategy, a learning strategy, rather than just a survival strategy.
Yeah. I love what you said about needing to have resilience before we actually need it. And I think that's such a really powerful thing to think about, because, it's that being proactive versus reactive, which I think, the default for most of us is I'll just deal with something when it comes up. But if you haven't put the exercise and the time in advance, how you handle whatever it is that comes up will be determined by that. So I'm keen to kind of unpack that a little bit with you as well, Stacey. But one of the things that you talk a lot about as well is gratitude and resilience. And I just want to speak about that for a little moment, because I feel like they seem to be very, very different things. Being resilient and being grateful, like, how do they even come together? Do you want to talk a little bit about that for a moment? Because I know this is a big thing for you.
Yeah, for sure. I've sort of discovered that gratitude is one of the key parts of building resilience and being resilient. And looking back at my own personal journey, it was a step beyond what I shared before, where I said that I began to change the story about what had happened. But then I ended up taking it a step further, and I actually became grateful for what had happened and how it changed my life. And then most people think, how the heck can ending up a quadriplegic and needing a wheelchair for the rest of your life be positive? But when people spend time with me, they quickly realise that I am genuinely happy about how it's changed my life, and can say with absolute certainty that there's things I've experienced and done that I would never have had the opportunity to do if life had taken the path I planned.
Yeah.
So I see gratitude as such a foundational part of resilience. And so gratitude is actually one of the practices that I recommend people do on a regular basis in order to build their resilience, both proactively and also situationally. I like to say more situationally rather than reactively. So gratitude and the way that I share gratitude and teach people how to use gratitude is it's not your typical write down three things you're grateful for, gratitude journaling, which I think is the most common thing that we hear over and over again. And it was something that I I tried myself and I had a really good crack at it, but I just found it didn't work for me. If anything, it felt a little bit wanky, and it felt like an obligation and a chore.
Yeah.
And so I wasn't experiencing gratitude as a result of doing that. So I experimented with a few different things, and what I ended up landing on was using mantras. And what I love about using a mantra is it doesn't matter how you feel. You're not looking for anything. All you're doing is taking a deep breath and saying a simple line. And it doesn't matter where you are, what you're doing, how you're feeling. Saying something in sort of 7 to 9 seconds or less is completely controllable. And what it does is it just brings us back into the moment. And the beauty of being in the moment is that, you can't be beating yourself up about the past, and you can't be getting worried about the future, because that's where, depression lives in the past, anxiety lives in the future. Gratitude brings us back into the moment.
Yeah.
But that's I think that's one of those foundational pieces for me. So, I speak a lot about both of those things, but ultimately gratitude is one of the foundational pieces of how we can actually build and maintain our resilience.
Yeah. That's awesome. I love the concept of mantras, and I want to just sit on gratitude for a little moment, because I think probably the big overarching question for a lot of listeners will be this one key thing, and that is, if I find it hard to be grateful for the hard things in my life, Stacey, how on earth do you make, what does that decision-making process look like for you in a situation that you were in, which most people couldn't fathom being in a situation like that, where, of course, you've lost the use of, majority of your body, and now you've got to find a way to be grateful for it. How do you get from being where you were to finding a way to be grateful? Does it take other people entering your life to help you with that process? Is it an aha moment that you had? What did that look like for you?
Yeah, for me, it was a step beyond that. I'm going to change the story I tell about it.
Yeah.
And then once I did that, it was just like, again, it was like a weight had been lifted off. And I find that, gratitude is such an abundant experience. And it opens up to possibility. And I find that if people find it difficult to sort of go, well, how could I be grateful for these things? The big thing is to trust it.
Yeah.
Because you may not feel grateful, but just by expressing gratitude, it changes the energy in your body, because it's not possible to feel bad about something you're grateful for. We can't experience two conflicting emotions and experiences at the same time. So by choosing gratitude, I think this is a big thing. It's a choice.
Yeah.
And just to say thank you. And I use, like, coming back to the mantra. So the mantra that I use is, thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time.
Yeah, that's a powerful one.
And what I love about that is it's not judging anything about that experience. It's just saying, you know what, I'm putting it out there that I'm grateful to be who I am, where I am, and all the things I have right now, I'm grateful for it.
Yeah.
And then once you begin a practice of gratitude, then it becomes so much easier, again, having that the reserves of the gratitude and the resilience. When the big things do happen, it's so much simpler and easier to just go, I'm just going to stop for a moment, take a few deep breaths and express gratitude and just sit with it for a bit. And sitting with it for a bit is something that I've only sort of really discovered over the last couple of years, because much like you were talking about before, is resilience just keeping up that front and keeping moving and not feeling things.
Yeah.
That's probably one of the mistakes I made through a lot of my life, is I was just like, next. And it's only been in the last 2 years, when I've started the process of writing my second book, which is more of a memoir, that I realized that so often I didn't actually stop at those key points in my life to feel. I just kept moving. And so now one of my big things is, as far as resilience, is stop for a moment.
Yeah.
It is. Be grateful for what you have. Feel what it is. Don't judge what you're feeling. Don't write the list of all the reasons why you feel that way.
Yeah.
Just feel sad, feel angry, feel disappointed, feel scared.
Yeah.
and just move through the emotions rather than avoiding them. And then you can move forward so much faster
Yeah.
when you actually feel it and then move forward.
Yeah. I love that you're talking about this, because for me, this has probably been, I would say this has been, for anyone who's in a similar age group to you and I think this has been a really big deal. And here's why I think this. I see generational patterns. And the pattern of my parents, and I have no doubt probably of many of our listeners right now, are looking back and go, okay, the way that they dealt with life, the way that they got through life was when painful things hit, you get on with it. And even now, look, the first thing my parents will say to me is, you either get angry about it, you fix it, or you move on. You just get over it. You get back on the horse. But feeling it, experiencing it, sitting with it, absolutely not even a consideration. It's that thick skin attitude. And, because a lot of us have grown up with that concept of, I just need to be tough. I need to be strong. I need a tough exterior. I can't let my kids see me struggle, which I now realize is probably one of the worst things I ever taught them, because it's actually teaching them not to experience, not to feel, not to be in those moments. But what I'm noticing now as an adult is that all those years of, I'm just going to get on with it, I'm just going to pretend I'm okay, I'm just going to have a thick skin, means that you now have to peel an onion. And I have no doubt you know exactly what I'm talking about here, Stacey. As things start coming up, you have to start getting curious with yourself and going, where's this coming from? How am I feeling in this moment? And actually allowing yourself to feel it. And when you've got a history of just be tough, just be strong, just move on with it, it can be hard to do that process, which will bring me to my next question in a sec. But I just want to ask, is this something that you see coming up a lot with a particular age group of people, or is this something that you yourself have experienced after all of those years of just sort of pushing it to the side and not going through that emotional experience, I suppose?
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and that's where I've been at the last couple of years as well. As I'm writing and digging, and as you said, just like the onion analogy is very apt, because there's also a lot of tears involved in the process as well. And sometimes it takes having a big ugly cry, and it makes all the difference. And I think for you sort of touching on generationally, I think what's been interesting is, I think, as you said, our parents were just keep pushing through. We sort of experienced a little bit of that. And then now I think, unfortunately, the pendulum has swung so far the other way, where it's feel everything and do nothing.
Yeah. Yeah, I would agree with that too.
So we're finding our teens and our young adults that every experience now is labelled as a mental health issue, whereas being disappointed does not equal depression.
Yeah. It's okay to feel depressed today. That doesn't mean you are depressed. It means today you're feeling something. Yeah. And not to downplay, of course, mental health, because I know I'll get slammed for doing that. But I completely agree with you in that I think sometimes we assume there's something wrong with us because we're feeling something today that, I'm a little out of sorts, or a lot out of sorts, and it's okay to be all of those things.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that there are genuine mental health concerns that some people do experience, like, chronically over time. Yep. But I feel so often it's just been so quick to label something as, and this is where it comes in. Like, I speak a lot about the language that we use, and because I feel how we describe a situation is how we experience a situation. So by awfulizing something and turning I feel sad into I'm depressed it's a big leap. And then the more you describe that, the more then you experience, like, you end up attracting more of that.
You focus on it. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you said, in that, even just that distinction between I'm depressed or I'm feeling depressed is again one of those language tweaks. And because often if people start to say I'm depressed or I'm sick, or I'm or they go my pain, my depression, my anxiety, then they're taking it on as part of their identity rather than a brief experience in time.
Yeah.
And that has a huge impact.
Yeah, look, I feel like we're definitely opening a can of worms here, and I'm kind of okay with that, because I think this is something that a lot of people are afraid to talk about. You get whenever you bring up the conversation about depression and mental health, and you have any opinion other than the fact that it's just this widely spread thing that everyone and anybody has and can have. I think it becomes this thing where it's a very, people want to argue for it. And the thing is, I want to argue as well for being everything, for being happy, for being joyful, for being sad, for being angry, because we're humans and it's okay. You can't expect us to experience one without the other. Such an important point. And I'm seeing this so much. I've now got teenage children, and we were just having a really long conversation about teenagers and kids and step parenting. My goodness, the challenges that come with that. There's a reason there's almost no books about it. It's because everyone's afraid to write one. But the thing here is, I've been to a lot of, school presentations. I've seen a lot of letters. I've watched a lot of what's going on now, and the awareness has gone so far the other way, where it's almost become a complete normalization of there's got to be something wrong with you. It's almost as if the kids are feeling like, if I don't have something wrong with me, I am no one, because it's become so normal. And I've got to be so careful. I'm going to get slammed for saying this, but it just concerns me because, I want our kids to know that every emotion you feel is part of being human. It doesn't make you abnormal. In fact, what is normal? It's a really difficult one. I just saw a comedian actually that yesterday just popped up on my Facebook feed, and he said something that I thought was so prominent right now. And that was, he said, I was having a conversation with a friend the other day, and, my generation, this is how we roll. He said, I just let my friend know I've got anxiety, and I just put it out there. And the friend said, oh, what are you doing about it? And he goes, no, nothing. I'm just letting you know so that you can work around it. I was like, yep. Call that kind of, I feel like that's sort of where we're at. It's this, I am this, I identify as this, and it's not a matter of what can I do because I feel helpless in it. It's a matter of I just kind of need the world to know, and I'm just going to make that who I am. And it's a really difficult conversation to have, isn't it, Stacey? I feel like we could get totally slammed for talking about this right now. But you know what? It's not because you and I haven't felt it. It's not because you and I haven't been through some insanely difficult times in very different ways and experienced all of those emotions. And, every day is different. Every day is a challenge. But at the same time, what can you do in this moment? What control can you have?
Yeah, I agree with you on that. And I think that this is something that one of my, in my book, the first chapter around resilience is responsibility.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm really passionate about personal responsibility. And
Yeah.
I feel that this is something that has been lost over time, is that exactly as you describe it, it's like this is who I am, or what I have going on, and the world must change to suit me, rather than what can I do to improve my experience.
Yeah.
And look, I've butted heads with people over the years on this one, particularly when it comes to disability, because I generally don't do a lot in the disability space, because my view is that I have responsibility for the experience I have. Whereas a lot of even the teachings around disability is that it's society that's disabling. And I just feel that is just I think it's very weak. I think that I think all of us, no matter where we're at and what our challenges or barriers may be, I think we need to come from a perspective of, what can I do to contribute rather than what can I get? And I said, I've butted heads over the years because people go, oh, but you're different. I'm like, but I've learned this along the way. I wasn't born just going, hey, I'm just going to take responsibility for everything in my life and all this sort of stuff. It's like, no, I think it comes down to when something doesn't go to plan or when we're having a challenging experience, again, feel it, but then what can we do about it?
Yeah.
What can we personally do about it? Not can we ask everybody else to do about it? And I think that that's something that's really powerful, and also too, like for your audience, it's that's what getting involved in business for yourself and stuff like that. It's actually taking that personal responsibility to go, you know what, I'm going to do something about making my life and my family's life and my lifestyle, my income, all of those things better. And so I think that that's super important to look at.
Yeah, what a big conversation. I'm completely agree with you, and I think that's all we can do as well. As much as it's what we should do, it's actually all we can do. The world won't change. The experience in the world won't change unless we take some responsibility for that experience. And each of us, and again, I get that it's hard on hard days. I totally understand that. It's not because I've had a picture perfect life and I can easily sit here and go, hey, everybody, just wake up and be happy. It's not how it rolls. But at the same time, I can't control, and this is coming from a confessed control freak here right now. If I can't control, and I know that I can't control the world, I can't control what goes on around me. The only thing I can control is my response to it. And, whilst that isn't perfect a lot of the time, probably most of the time it's not, I have a moment of every moment where I can make a choice to change that reaction. And there's no too late. There's never a too late. I might have not been handling it well up until this point, but now I'm in this point and I can make a decision to change the way I'm responding. And that can be as simple as I'm just going to stop and think about what I can actually truly be grateful for in this moment. And that's where I just want to come to this question, because Stacey, this one for me has been a hard one over the years. I've had some incredible mentors to help me with what you were talking about with gratitude and learning to be grateful for the difficult things that we've experienced. And for some, that seems like an overwhelming concept right now. So what I want to just talk about for a second is, how do you go from being in an incredibly difficult position? It may be the loss of a loved one. It may be a marriage breakup. It may be, a difficult time with a child. It may be, something similar to what you've been through, Stacey. But the question I've got here is, how do you go from that situation that you may be in the thick of at the moment, where the last thing you feel like being is in any way, shape or form grateful for this? Can you give some advice on how someone might be able to start that adjustment of their perspective? If they're like, I want to do what I can, it's just I feel like I can't do anything right now. Have you got even a simple step or a little piece of advice to help someone who might be in that position at the moment?
Yeah, I think the big thing is, and this is again something that I've learned more recently, is to actually acknowledge that it sucks.
Mm-hmm.
In that moment, again, it comes back to this whole thing. We need to feel things for a bit. So just acknowledge it sucks, but it's not always going to suck. And that's where it's taking the moment to, again, express gratitude, even if you're not feeling it right then, but also feel all the feels that are going on there.
Yeah.
And trust that, again, it will get better. We don't know how quickly it'll get better. But, setting that intention that, again, that's something that you're going to see as it's a gift in some way, and it may not seem a gift in the moment. So sort of 3-step thing that I have is say thank you. Then the next question to plant, and again, you don't get the answers straight away. Sometimes these things, sometimes you might get an answer immediately. Sometimes it might be a week later. Sometimes it might be 5 years later. Is I say, well, what's the lesson in this? What did I need to learn from this? Or where's the opportunity in this situation? And then the third seed to plant is, how could that help somebody else? And again, sometimes that doesn't become apparent until a long time down the track as well. But ultimately, if you start with the gratitude because you can't feel bad about something you're grateful for, plant the seed of what's the gift, what's the learning, what's the opportunity, and then and then how would it help somebody else? Then that actually then has that situation that seems so negative in the moment can end up being something incredibly valuable. but it's a perspective shift, and knowing that it's not going to instantly shift. It's not like you're going to go, oh my gosh, I know all this,
Suddenly
and now I've
it's
just
all
moved
good.
on.
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to come back to that onion peeling concept, because I think this really aligns with, that what you said earlier about feel it, but don't necessarily feel like you have to solve it or get why. There are often moments, and I will say this is because of, for me, how I coped with lots of stuff that went on in my childhood, and then my first marriage, and all of those sorts of things. And because I kind of just did this constant get on with it, it's okay, just be tough, just move on. The onion peeling thing is something you actually don't control. There are days that you wake up, and I'm sure you experience this, Stacey, and I feel like it's a human thing. All of our listeners probably experience it. You wake up and you're like, today there's a layer is coming off that onion, and you can just feel it, something's going down. And sometimes Greg will say to me, what's going on, are you all right? And it's like, no, just it's just a layer of the onions coming off right now. And in those moments, I've learned that it's not about logically working out what's going on, why am I feeling this. It's about just going and actually saying, sometimes verbalizing, this doesn't make sense, but this is what I'm feeling about blah. And I just need to kind of just get it out. And sometimes just acknowledging that it's not okay. Well, not that it's not okay. It just doesn't necessarily make sense why I feel this, because often emotions get triggered by certain things that happen, through your day or through your week or through your month. And it might just simply be that someone said something to you that was completely innocent, but it's just set, I guess, a train in motion. And you're like, I don't get why I'm suddenly so emotional about this thing, because the thing doesn't matter, and it's often not about that. And what I've learned is you don't actually have to understand what it's necessarily about. And I love how you said that earlier. You don't have to rationalize everything. Just feel it in that moment and just go, this is actually okay that I'm feeling like this at the moment. And it's a lot quicker. You said it's a lot quicker. I love that, because it's so true. But it's painful. You know how they talk about sometimes you got to go through the valley. It's a lot quicker than it is to go around it. And I just think that's, such a great thing that you said there, and a really good reminder that sometimes we just have to feel it and go through it, as hard as that can be.
I totally agree. And it's a matter of going, well, what do you need to do to feel things? Sometimes it might be just taking some time out for an hour or two, and might be sitting in silence. It might be going out in nature. I write. So I find that I'll sit with things for a while. I'll sit in silence. I'll feel it. And then sometimes it might be a big, ugly cry.
Yeah.
But then I'll generally write about it. It's something that I find, it's probably something that it probably has become a little bit of almost a bit of a challenge for me in that I sort of hear something interesting, or I think of something interesting, and I feel I always have to write everything down.
Yeah.
But that's not necessarily true. But I find, particularly if I'm having some of those challenging times, then it is a matter of writing it down is good for me.
It's a great
and also
outlet,
just letting the people, and just letting the people around me know that I'm feeling. I just say to my boyfriend, I said, just letting you know, I've got a bit of the sads today. It's nothing that you've done. I'm just going to sit with this for a bit. I don't need you to do anything. I don't need you to fix anything. I just need to sit with this for a bit, and I'll let you know when I'm good.
Yeah.
And it's also recognizing too that this isn't just a linear process. You mentioned like the layer of the onion coming off. It's like sometimes one layer comes on and then three go back on again.
Yeah.
And so it's like, I heard someone say once, sometimes you think, oh yeah, I thought I was done with that. And the analogy he used was, it's like, what, you went to the bathroom once and you feel like you never got to go to the bathroom ever again. And it's like, these things happen, they come at different times. And but I think the more that we can really feel through things at the time that they happen, the less likely they are to be recurring issues for us in the long run.
Yeah, 100%. Now, I want to talk a little bit about resilience again right now, because that's really the core of this conversation. And coming back to that, now knowing that, it's as much about being prepared as what it is about dealing with things in the moment and how you're going to cope with those things. I want to just talk about, is resilience something that you believe that we're born with? We either have it or we don't, or is it something we can get more of?
Yeah, there's often a perception that people think, oh, you're just naturally resilient.
Yeah.
That's just how it is.
I'm just a resilient person, or I'm just not a resilient person. Yeah.
Yeah. And then people have a perception that I'm a resilient person. It's like, I know I actually work at this every day. But I find that it's a bit of it's like a continuum.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that at any given time, we can be more to one end to the other. And so that given, what our experiences are, what our perceptions are, some people generally have a little bit more of a negativity bias to a positivity bias. So if that's the case, they're probably likely to sort of be a little bit further to one end of the scale on the continuum of resilience. But the beauty of it is that I've discovered that it's a skill.
Yeah.
It's a skill that can be learned, and it doesn't matter how lacking in resilience someone may perceive that they are. But just by implementing simple practices, and I like to call them rituals for resilience, if we can implement these simple practices over time, then we can build it. And the thing that I can liken it to the most is that, you go to the gym to build and maintain physical strength and build muscle.
Mm-hmm.
So in the gym, you'll go, okay, I'm going to work this particular muscle group. Yeah. And then there's a specific set of exercises that you do. And all those exercises is simple, repetitive movements done consistently over time, and that builds strength. And then resilience is the same. It's like, okay, there's principles around resilience and there's rituals that you can do to build those kind of pillars. Yeah. And then if you implement those rituals consistently over time, then you build your resilient strength. Mm-hmm. But much like going to the gym, it's like we have to keep going to the gym, otherwise we lose it. And resilience is exactly the same. And I've found personally, if I find myself feeling stressed or overwhelmed or frustrated, that the first thing I need to do is look at, okay, what have my practices been like with my rituals? And 99% of the time, I'll be able to tell you that I've dropped the ball on some of them or all of them over a period of time. And then it just creeps up. And that's when things start to kick your backside over time. And then it's like, okay, get back into those practices, and then you can sort of get back on the track with it.
Yeah, awesome. So, look, I know that this is probably a really big conversation for another time, or even the reading of your book, but can you just maybe label a couple of those practices just to give people an idea of what that can look like, how hard, how easy that is? Is it something that they can implement? Can you share just a little bit along those lines with our listeners?
Oh, for sure. So we've sort of touched briefly on some of them already, but some of the principles that I have in the book, one of them I think is probably it's the simplest and quickest way to turn things around is the language. And as we explored before, is that the way you describe a situation is how you experience it. And so it's being very conscious of the language that we use and the impact of the words we use. So it's trying not to be overly dramatically negative and awfulizing situations, and being conscious of how you can be more positive in the words you use.
Yeah.
And the ritual around that is journaling. So through the course of journaling, then just writing down a couple of lines about your day, you can start to see reflected back to you, how am I describing my day? Am I being overly negative, or am I being pretty positive? And so what you can do then is you can actually start to then tweak the words you use. And while you don't change the facts of what happened during your day, you can change the story you tell about it. And if you do that very quickly after those things happen, then again, it doesn't creep up on you and come back and bite you down the track. So journaling is super powerful. And a lot of people don't journal because they think, oh, I'm not a good writer, or I don't know what to write about, or they feel that they have to write loads of stuff. But for me, I just started by committing to writing one sentence a day. And that one sentence was around what was the best thing that happened today. And because you get what you look for. So if you start to look for the good, you're going to see more good.
Yeah.
And so I used to just write, today I had the opportunity to, and finish the sentence. And
Yeah,
that's
I love
evolved
that.
now
So
into,
easy. Yeah.
today I had the opportunity to. Everyone can write a sentence. It may only take you a minute. And whether you want to handwrite it, do it electronically. I do mine electronically. But sometimes that's turned into, I've had nights where I've written 3,000 words in my
Oh, wow.
journal, because it's just like, there's just been a prompt that's just, I don't know, I've had a big day, or I start to explore things, and, I find it really useful. The other one is, is gratitude. Just as I shared, like the use of mantras. So, I suggested a mantra earlier. Today I had, thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time. The way that I use that as a ritual is at night before I fall asleep. So I'm in bed, my eyes are closed, and I say that to myself.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the last message that's implanted in my mind before I go to sleep. So I'm programming my sleep cycle with gratitude.
Yep.
And then when I wake up, when the alarm goes off, before I'll hit stop, and then before I open my eyes properly, I'll say it again. Thank you for the opportunity to be who I am, where I am, with what I have at this moment in time.
Yeah.
And then during the day, if I find myself feeling overwhelmed or stressed or off track, then I stop, take a couple of breaths, and say that again. And that's just been super powerful for just conditioning myself to be in that abundance, open, gratitude, possibility mindset. So I find that that's an amazing way to build your resilience. And the other one that I use a lot is music. And it's a new one. I hadn't even explored it in the book when I wrote it at the time, but music's been a really powerful part of, I feel, keeping me alive at the lowest points in my life.
Yeah.
I find music, it changes our vibration, changes our frequency and our energy. I also find that music, for me personally, it gives us a way to express ourselves sometimes when we don't have the words to express how we're feeling. So it's picking a favorite song that if you're feeling flat, that can lift you up.
Yep.
And then it's also picking a song where you find, if you're too wired, too stressed, or feeling a little bit anxious, that you can play and you can immerse yourself in, and you can just chill out and just
I think
do that as well.
On that too, I almost wanted to bring it up before, but you've done it, inadvertently now, which is, in those moments where you're feeling emotional, how sometimes you just don't know how to express what you're feeling and get it out, but you get the right song on at that time, and it's kind of like it helps you feel it, in a sense, putting on something that you can sing to, or it's almost as though the words are found for you. And I feel like we're really good at finding those things ourselves, as well. So, that was something that came to mind for me, because, over the years, journaling is something that has come and gone, but music is something that I've often used to help me with processing certain emotions that don't necessarily make logical sense, but you can just kind of get it out. You guys know what I'm talking about. I know you do, because, we all do it, I think, without even realizing we do. And, you feel those songs, those words in those moments, and it helps with that. So I think that's a really good one to bring up. I actually want to talk a little bit now about parenting, because it's very easy for us to look at ourselves and go, okay, great, I need to practice this, and this is what I can do. But as a parent of teenagers right now, I've already spoken a little bit about that experience, watching them and going, okay, I want, as a parent, to show my kids how they can practice resilience without saying, get over. I don't want to be like what our parents were and say, get over it, move on, have a thick skin. It's important our kids feel, but also without labeling them as having something wrong with them. And so I just wanted to ask you the question, if you're looking at your kids right now and you're going, I can definitely totally see that resilience is something that would be, a great thing for them to learn to practice to help them get through these really difficult years right now. Do you have any advice for parents on how they can support maybe their teenagers or even younger children to be more personally resilient?
Yeah, for sure. It's actually probably one of the most common questions that I get asked as well, particularly when I'm speaking to to corporate groups or to associations or different companies, a lot of people go, how do I do this with my kids? And so what I've done, and it's worked really well for a lot of people, and if kids of varying ages as well, you could start this from when they're really little, and you can do it right through to, forever, really. The one thing I get them to start with is just asking, usually either it's, sometimes it could be in the car on the way home from school, or it could be over dinner. And it's asking, what was the best thing that happened today? And because often I found, and I observed this when I was a step parent for a while, that, his dad would ask him when we picked him up from school, how was your day? Not bad. What did you do? Not much. And that was the pattern every single day. And I'm like, I want to experiment with this. And so then I started to ask, well, what was the best thing that happened today? And at first he was a bit resistant. And then so I'd go, well, what was the least worst thing that happened today? And because especially with teenagers, you can just go, what was the least crappy thing that happened today? It's like sort of take it back to where they are and sort of
meet them where they're at. I love it.
Inch them forward. So just starting with that. And then you can sort of start to go into some other questions. And I think from a resilience perspective, I think if you can ask them, well, what was the most challenging thing that happened today? And get them to start to actually celebrate them experiencing challenge, and then also talk to them about what they did about it. And maybe they might go, oh, nothing. And and you go, well, what could you do? And so it's lots of conversations. And this is also, I say even with my business clients, it's like if you're in a leadership role, it's having consistent conversations, informal conversations with your team all the time. And so, and similar conversations can happen with your kids, particularly if you're looking at teens now. I'd use the same questions I'd use with my business clients. So it could be, first of all, how are you feeling? What are you working on? What are you finding most challenging? And how can I best support you? And if you have those conversations on a regular basis, it's incredible, because you start to get a baseline of where people are at, and then you'll get to know when something's off, and then you can feel more confident in asking them. It's like, are you okay? You just don't seem yourself. And then because you've had those conversations regularly, they're going to feel probably more safer to open up as well. And also from a business perspective, I'd often get asked about how do you have a difficult conversation? I'm like, if you have these conversations all the time, then it's highly unlikely that you're ever going to get to a point where a conversation is difficult.
Yep. I love that. There's some really great stuff in that. And, I'm going to work on that one with my kids too. I asked that question yesterday, how was your day? And my son went, not good. And I was like, okay, why? No reason. I was like, great. Okay. I need to work on this. So I love that. I'm going to try that one. I think that's fantastic. So just really quickly, your book, How to Be Resilient, how can our listeners get hold of your books? I highly recommend that they do. We'll put the links, of course, in the show notes, but can you share that a little bit with everybody now that's thinking, right, I need to read more up on this. I need Stacey's help.
Yeah, well, the best place you can get access to all versions of the book, there's an e-book, there's an audio book, and then there's the old school paperback, is at howtoberesilient.com. But you can also pick it up from your local bookstore or Amazon, any of those places. And if they don't have it on the shelf, just go and ask for it. And what's really cool about this book, and something that I'm really proud of, is that it's not just something that you read and then pop on the shelf. At the end of each section, each principle of resilience, there's a series of exercises that I take you through that will help you actually implement those things in practice. So there's space if you can scribble in the margins, you can write in those sections, but also you can download the PDF and print off those things if you don't like to write in your books. Howtoberesilient.com.
I love it. All right. We'll put that in the show notes as well. So if anyone's watching this video, they can check that out there. And I do have, Stacey, some fun questions for you as well. The first of which, ironically, is what is your favourite book for our Accelerator book list?
Well, I thought that probably my favourite book that I would use most commonly is probably already on the list. So I thought, what's a book that I can share with you that I love that your listeners may not be aware of. And so the book that I would love to share with them is a book called The Relationship Fix.
Ooh.
And it's by Dr. Jen Mann, so
Yep.
JENNMANN. And what it is, it's mainly about your romantic relationships, but considering that direct selling is such a relationship-driven business, it's a really, really practical book. It's something that's got loads of, checklists and questions, but I just found it an amazing book.
Yep.
I refer to it regularly. I saw her speak at an event in Sydney many years ago, and it just had such an impact on me. I use a lot of it in my own personal relationships, both romantic and otherwise. So The Relationship Fix, highly recommend.
I'm going to check that one out.
List.
But you did open up the question, which is, what was the other book you're going to say that's already on our book list, you think?
Think and Grow Rich. It absolutely has to be on there.
It's probably one of the most popular ones that comes up, but I still love for people to hear it because I think it's a great one for them to read.
Oh, absolutely. It's I think it was transformational for me, that's for sure.
Yeah. Love it. Okay, next question is, if you could have a superpower, what would it be and why?
Teleportation would absolutely be my favourite. I would love to be in lots of different places, but I hate travel. So if I could teleport and save myself the pain and grief of long-haul travel or having to pack or being uncomfortable on a plane or lost luggage or any of those things, then teleportation would 100% be on my list.
I love that one, but I'm just going to throw it out there. Like I hate the challenge of travel. I love the process of travel. So I sort of feel like you've just made me think about how cool would it be if you could have the superpower of like permanent upgrades and seamless travel. Always being in business class, nothing ever being late, everything always being seamless, but you still get to do all the processes. Because I love the experience along the way as much as anything else, the anticipation.
Yeah, I could do without airports and planes, even with the upgrade. But hotels, I think hotels are cool, room service, all that sort of stuff. There's something really cool about being in a new hotel and opening every cupboard and every drawer and seeing what's in the fridge. And,
what do the toiletries in this one look like? Yeah.
Exactly.
Things you don't want to admit that you check out every time anyway.
We all do. It doesn't matter how many times we stay
somewhere. What sort of coffee does this hotel have? That for me is like the first thing I'm beelining. What does the coffee look like? And I instantly judge the hotel based on that, by the way.
Yeah, I'm similar. I don't go for the coffee, but I'm like, do they have peppermint tea?
Oh, yep. And what sort? Is it good stuff or is it like just the, just our hotel friends note the things we pay attention to?
And we do.
Your favourite quote, Stacey?
My favourite quote is a Gandhi quote, and it was, strength does not come from physical capability. It comes from an indomitable will.
Ooh, I love that. That's a good one. Awesome. And our very, very last question is, if you could go back in time and say one thing to your past self, what would that be?
It's interesting. I think it depends on at what point in my life past self it would be. So if I could have permission to use 2 points, if that is okay on that one. So if I was to go back to, my 12-year-old self at the lowest point in my life, then I would just say, look, this really does suck, but it's not going to suck forever. And that's a big one. I think I never really had that. I never really felt I had the permission to just really go, this really does suck. Yeah. And the other one I would do is I'd go back to my 20s and I'd tell myself not to stop stretching. Ooh. As far as physically stretching, because in my 40s now and having to do a lot of work to loosen up some muscles that had I kept up a regular stretching practice. And it's amazing just how much of an impact tight muscles has on our experience. So don't stop stretching.
Don't stop stretching. I love that. I think don't stop stretching even mentally as well, right?
Yeah, as I said it out loud, I think I said, I'm talking about physically, and I'm like, no, you know what?
Everything.
That's actually a great approach to life in general, isn't it? Don't stop stretching.
You just stumbled on a new book. stretching.
That's
Speaking
it.
of books, I said it was the last question, but I do want to know, when are you expecting your new book to be out? Because you made mention that you're writing a second book, which is more of a memoir.
Yeah. Oh, look, I was expecting it to be done about a year ago, which is typically how these things go.
Yes.
What I've done is I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I found it was actually getting in the way of my business. And so I've given myself a bit of a permission to put that aside for a little bit. So for the rest of the next sort of 3 to 6 months, I'm really excited about really growing a few things in my business. I've got some really great opportunities at the moment. So my priority right now is business. I think over the Christmas break, then that's going to be somewhere I'm going to go back and revisit that and just sort of see, like, how is it feeling? I'm at the point now where I've got another book that I want to write. So I've got 2 books I want to write. So I want to write Rituals for Resilience, and as well as the
she's
memoir.
going to rename it Stretching.
Yes, that's it. Don't stop stretching.
Don't stop stretching. Yeah, I love it. Well, Stacey, you know what? This has been, I think, first of all, thank you for your honesty today, because I feel like this has probably been a much more real conversation than I predicted it would be. But I think in many ways probably a really good one. And can I throw it out there that if anyone's challenged by anything we said today, can I just encourage you to ask why and just dive a little bit deeper? Because one thing that I've learned over the years is that when someone challenges me, my first gut reaction is to get mad at that person. But sometimes I can stop and think, hang on a second, and this often happens a little later on down the track. What was I learning in that moment, or what was being shown to me that I actually, I would have benefited from seeing it at that point in time? So I just want to challenge you with this, in the most loving way possible. Some of the stuff that we've said today has absolutely been on the challenging side, and it's not because we're standing up and saying we know everything about mental health, and we don't profess to be mental health professionals in any way, shape or form. But we've both been through, various different versions of things, and we both had experience as well with teenagers and kids and stepchildren and all of those fun things. And sometimes it's really great to just stop in the moment and learn from one another and know that we're all going through stuff, and that's something as well. Everyone's going through something. So, thank you as well for just sharing today, Stacey. It's such an amazing story, and you've got so much incredible stuff to show people. So, I just really appreciate you taking this time out to share your story and your experience with our audience today.
Thank you. It's been an absolute pleasure, and I love where our conversation went. I think it's one of those things I always trust, that things go where they need to go rather than where we want them to go. And that's life in general, isn't it? We get what we need, not what we want. But yeah, if I can just add on, as you said, it's if someone has felt a little bit challenged or triggered by something that's been said, is I heard recently someone said a trigger is an opening. And so if you can do that, if something external is triggering something in us, then ask about why is that so, and also what about where are we maybe doing something similar in our own worlds. And it's often the world's a mirror to us in so many ways.
Absolutely. And I think anyone listening to this episode is probably listening for a reason too. Often people switch on to certain episodes that we do and go, whoa, I really needed to hear that in that moment. Just thank you to everybody for tuning in, sending you all loads of love. And again, thank you so much, Stacey. Make sure that you grab Stacey's book. So again, that website, Stacey, if you could just repeat that for everybody.
howtoberesilient.com.
Beautiful. Thank you again so much. And for all of our listeners, thank you. It's been great chatting about all of this today and getting to know you a little bit better as well, Stacey. And of course, if you've got an event coming up with your company, don't forget Stacey is an incredible keynote speaker as well to speak on resilience also. So make sure you check her out. But for now, thank you again so much to everybody for tuning in, Stacey, for joining us. It's been great to have you, and we'll see you all again on the podcast next week. But that's it from us. Bye for now. Thank you for joining us in this episode of the Direct Selling Accelerator podcast. If you love listening and you found that this was helpful for your direct selling business, please like and subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can also check out the recommended video that's popped up on your screen right here. I look forward to seeing you again next time. Bye for now.